Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 2025 PKD Summit. My name is Michelle Goodfellow, and I'm the Communications and Engagement Manager for the PKD Foundation of Canada, which is the only national organization solely dedicated to fighting PKD through research, advocacy and awareness, and education and support. This session is a presentation by registered dietitian Emily Campbell on the topic of how to fit PKD-friendly nutrition advice into you and your family's daily life. We're excited to share that we will be publishing volume 2 of our PKD cookbook, Love Your Kidneys, very soon. And Emily will be sharing some of the advice that is included in the new cookbook, which she has been involved in. We will have a live question and answer period at the end of the event. So if you'd like to put your questions anytime in the Q&A area or in the chat, we'll try and get to everything. This session is being recorded and will be available to view on our YouTube channel in the coming weeks. I'll now introduce our presenter. Emily Campbell is a registered dietitian and certified diabetes educator with a master's degree in foods and nutrition. Emily specializes in helping those with kidney disease overcome the confusing world of nutrition to promote health. Emily can be found at kidneynutrition.ca. Welcome, Emily, and I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for being here for today's session, PKD Nutrition That Works for Your Life. My name is Emily Campbell, and I am so excited to be part of this PKD Summit and talk to you about something that impacts us every single day, food. Nutrition can really feel complicated when you're living with PKD. There's so much information out there, and not all of it is really clear or even consistent. And so my goal today is to really simplify it for you and to help you walk away with a few practical steps that you can start using today. So what we'll cover in today's session is we'll understand what nutrition is for PKD. We'll look at what's new with nutrition for PKD, particularly around some of the 2025 recommendations. We'll talk about how nutrition strategies for daily life can work for you. And finally, where you can get support for living with PKD, because you don't have to figure this out alone. But just a quick reminder before we get started, everything that we'll be discussing today is going to be general information. And nutrition for PKD can look different for each person. So it's really important that you check with your nephrologist or your dietitian for personalized advice. As we get started, let's begin with a quick chat question. What is the most confusing part about nutrition and PKD for you? If you want to let me know in the chat, I would love to hear just that. That way we can get started with where you want to learn about and how things are going right now for you. Maybe it's protein, maybe it's salt, maybe it's potassium. Type it in the chat. I love hearing what comes up because chances are someone else is also wondering that while we're here today. I know for me, work with many individuals with PKD, and so thank you for submitting some of your questions. So here's a few coming in. So is keto safe or recommended? Yeah, protein and salt. Yeah, these are all really common questions, and we'll talk a bit about these. More will come up, so please keep putting them in the chat. If you have a specific question, also feel free to use that Q&A and we'll get to them as well. Here, another one, high potassium diet and potassium binders. Okay, plant-based proteins better than, yep, animal-based and anemia. Okay, great. Lots of really diverse questions. This is amazing. In order for me to answer those, we first kind of need to have an understanding of how nutrition fits in with PKD. Living with PKD, it often raises some tough questions about what to eat or how food choices affect your health. PKD causes cysts to grow in the kidneys, and over time, this can affect the kidney function. It can also increase our blood pressure. Now, nutrition doesn't cure PKD, but it is a very powerful tool in managing it. And eating well can help to slow the disease progression, can help to manage our blood pressure. It can also reduce the stress on our kidneys. And when we think about all of the other amazing things that nutrition can help with, It can also help with reducing inflammation. It can help with weight control, blood sugar control. So nutrition is this amazing thing. I know anemia was one of the things that popped into the chat there. Nutrition can also help with managing anemia. And nutrition for PKD differs quite vastly from chronic kidney disease. And this is one of the very confusing parts, I think, that when we look online and when we see things, we often get confused with that. So many people think that the kidney diet is one and for all. And the advice for people who are on dialysis versus living with PKD versus chronic kidney disease are very different. And so I know that some questions came in about dialysis and PKD, so I'll get to kind of where those differ as we're discussing. So one kind of thing as we're starting to think about this is that one of our blood work is really important for us to look at when we're making nutrition changes, because one, it gives us a feedback mechanism, but also helps us to personalize it to us. So many people with PKD often tell me that one of the hardest parts is just figuring out what to believe and what to do with it. There is a lot of confusing information online. There's often conflicting recommendations depending on what you're looking at. Sometimes that can lead us to fatigue. Maybe one resource you say says no bananas, and the other one says you need potassium for your blood pressure. So you're probably wondering what actually is safe and what can I really eat. Other things like lack of time, right? We might be busy, we might be working, we might be taking care of our parents or children. And so cooking for PKD can be a challenge as well. Cost of food, right now the cost is going up. And also our food skills, right? Are we even able to prepare these nutritious meals when we have PKD? And while these are challenges, I think today we'll talk a bit about some of how we can alleviate some of these for you and make nutrition a bit easier for you. There's no specific diet that's been proven to delay the progression of PKD. There's healthy eating patterns that can support both kidney health and cholesterol and blood pressure health, and that's really what we'll focus on. And I know one of those kind of topics is things like, is the keto diet really helpful for us? We'll talk a bit about how sugar impacts us when we have PKD, but current recommendations and guidelines from 2025 don't recommend the keto diet for PKD. There's not too much research to give us a concrete recommendation for it yet. So what we're following here in Canada really focuses on foods that are emphasizing more fiber, emphasizing fresh foods from vegetables and fruits, whole grains, nuts, and also plant-based proteins, and then limits things that are high in salt, sugar, fat, and animal proteins. So really, a general healthy diet can help to control cyst formation. It can help to manage our cholesterol. It can help to manage our blood pressure, and it can help to preserve our kidney function. So as we get started here, I'm curious to know if there's one piece of advice that you've maybe heard or read online that's left you unsure about nutrition for PKD. Is there something that you've maybe been skeptical about? Something like, you have to go vegan or you can't eat tomatoes? Let me know in the chat. What I tried to, yeah, very common. There is nothing wrong with tomatoes, Garnet. Wondering if there's anything wild you've heard online. Okay, to avoid dairy, definitely don't need to avoid dairy. So one of the things when we read things online is it's really important that we look at the source of the information and also how up to date it is, because things can change very quickly in the nutrition world. Right now we're working off of 2025 guidelines, which is amazing, but they're always getting updated. So we'll show you where you can get some resources as well today. Let's move on to what's new with PKD for and nutrition, and that's going to help us start to answer some of these questions about blood pressure, potassium, phosphorus, and protein. So today we're really going to focus on highlighting those 2025 guidelines. Your doctor has likely recommended to you that you drink more water and you follow a low sodium diet. And a low sodium diet is usually anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 milligrams of salt per day. So it's just a little bit less than a teaspoon of salt. And we need to drink more fluids or more water, at least 3 liters of fluids per day, to help manage that hormone in our body, which causes cysts to grow. Uh, how much you need to drink may differ depending on if you're on medications or if you have any other health conditions, but generally the recommendation is at least 3 liters per day. What's great about these kind of guidelines now is that they can allow us dietitians and physicians to give you a bit more information and direction as to what we want to do with PKD. The guidelines, they talk about protein, they talk about sodium, but they've also included things about fiber, sugar, and fats. And that's an area that we're going to talk a bit about today because these are all things that we can control. And when we make small daily choices around fiber, sugar, and fats, they actually add up and they can make it overall our diet much healthier and allow us to control things like our cholesterol, our blood sugars, weight management. And when we can keep all of those in check as well, we can develop a really, really balanced diet for us. So when we think about fiber, we'll talk about that first. Fiber includes really all parts of the plant that your body can't digest or absorb. It's known as this roughage or bulk. And fiber comes from many plant foods. It comes from fruits and vegetables and whole grains and legumes and nuts and seeds. It's really this like part of our body or part of food that we can't digest. We just get rid of it. It is really important for reducing inflammation. And when we have any kidney conditions, our body is in a state of inflammation, meaning our body is kind of in this fight or flight response. And we want to reduce inflammation so that it makes it easier for our bodies to use nutrients and to kind of preserve our kidney function. Fiber also helps to support gut health. And there's so much research about the healthy gut microbiome, and that's those kind of items in our digestive tract which help to give us prebiotics and help to manage our immune system and also help to minimize inflammation. And we now know that poor gut health is linked to kidney disease. So we want to make sure that our gut microbiome and all those good bugs in there are doing their best and getting good nutrients, and they get those from fiber foods. And fiber also helps to lower urine albumin. That is that protein in our urine, meaning we're not spilling out extra protein. And sometimes you see that test on your urine test called the urine to albumin or creatinine to albumin ratio. And that's an important measure for us to look at. And when we're spilling out protein, that often can be related to high blood pressure. So eating high fiber foods, these are some really important benefits to them, but they also help us feel full for longer, which can help control our appetite and weight management. The target for individuals with PKD is 25 to 38 grams of fiber per day. Most of us, even dietitians, struggle with getting that amount of fiber per day. In fact, Canadians usually only get about half of what we need per day. So this target of 25 to 38 grams per day, it works out to be about 5 servings of vegetables and fruit per day. And the amount that is quite a big range, 25 to 38 grams, it really depends on our age and whether or not we're male or female. So men, for example, between 19 and 50, they require about 38 grams of fiber per day, whereas women between 19 and 50 require only 25 grams. If we're over 50, those numbers get reduced. So for men, it's 30 grams, and for women, it's 21 grams per day. But kind of targeting that 25 to 38 is a great touch point. When we're increasing our fiber, though, we really want to do that slowly. And we may need to drink more fluids as well as our fiber increases because it will help to work better. It also helps to prevent bloating and gas and diarrhea if we're increasing our fiber intake, or constipation sometimes when we increase our fiber. So far, there's really no upper limit, though, on fiber. And so it shouldn't be a problem for most healthy people. Some of our ways to meet our fiber intake, aiming for half of our plate in vegetables at each meal. Try to have fruit as a snack, choosing whole grains, including more of these plant-based proteins like legumes, nuts, and seeds. are really easy ways to increase our fiber intake. I'd love to hear in the chat some ways that you add, vegetables into your meals as well. Check here. I know there was a question about plant versus animal-based protein. So plant-based proteins, they have much more fiber than animal proteins. They're much easier on our kidneys to filter. They have less saturated and trans fats in them compared to animal-based proteins. So overall, plant-based proteins are much healthier to incorporate into our diet. And ideally, we want to try to aim for that at 2 meals per day. There is no limit of how many lentils or beans or legumes that you can have per day. They're much lower in protein compared to animal-based proteins per serving. So it also helps us keep on track with how much protein we're having per day. Garnet, I love the 1/2 cup of all bran buds on your yogurt. A serving is actually 1/3 of a cup. So you don't necessarily need to have a 1/2 cup. And Shelley, she adds them to some salads and more fruit as ways to get some extra fiber. Great, love that idea. One of the things when we think about fiber is we often get asked about potassium because vegetables and fruits, whole grains, nuts and seeds, they all have potassium in them. And with PKD, there isn't a potassium restriction unless your blood potassium is high. And one of the things that we've learned a lot more about is that these additives can happen in foods. So, for example, in dairy products or in no added salt products, they often are adding potassium to them, and we absorb 100% of this additive. So we do want to avoid potassium additives, but potassium from food is fine. The bioavailability of it is actually quite low. It's usually around 60-ish%, depending on the food, meaning we don't actually absorb all that potassium that we get in a banana. In fact, the potassium is helpful for lowering our blood pressure. The fiber from the foods helps to manage our gut and inflammation. So keeping foods with potassium in our diet is okay. Now, if you are asked to follow a low potassium diet, that's often around 2,500 to 3,000 milligrams, depending on your blood levels of potassium. But truthfully, what we've seen in most recent years is it's not always diet that causes our potassium to go high. Things like constipation, blood sugar control, our medications, those can also increase potassium levels. So working with a dietitian is really important to understand what type of restriction you may need if your potassium is high. If your potassium is fine, you don't need to follow a potassium restriction because these fiber foods, they play such a big role in it. So there's 2 types. There's soluble fiber and there's insoluble fiber. And soluble fiber is this like sticky, think like things that dissolve in water and absorb fluid, and then it passes through our digestive tract. And this leads us to have nice, soft bowel movements. And this type of fiber is also really important for managing our cholesterol and our blood sugars. So we get soluble fiber from things like carrots and okra and eggplants and apples and oranges and berries and oatmeal and beans and legumes, and also psyllium. Insoluble fiber, think of that as that like bulking fiber. So soluble helps with the roughage, insoluble helps with the bulking. That's the one that absorbs water into our stools to help us have bigger bowel movements or poops and keep us more regular. And that's where we get from things like whole wheats, nuts and seeds, leafy vegetables. And that's why we need a variety of fruits and vegetables in our diet so that we get both of these types of fiber in our target of that 25 to 38 grams. So that we can have all of these really, really great benefits. So, we often think about having that half of our plate and having, a variety of colors of vegetables and fruits throughout our day, as that gives us the most nutrients in it. So here's an example of what a high fiber day could look like. So in the morning, maybe have some yogurt with chia seeds and blackberries. At lunch, some edamame, broccoli, brown rice, and some avocado, kind of like a salad. At dinner, maybe it's some whole wheat pasta, tomato sauce with some chicken. half a cup of spinach and a bell pepper, and then some snack baby carrots and hummus. And if we add all of these things up, that's about 34 grams of fiber per day, which is wonderful, right within that target of 25 to 38 grams per day. We really can't overeat on fiber. There's no upper limit. Finding more ways that we can incorporate these higher fiber sources into our diet can be helpful with that. One serving, as I mentioned, that KDIGO recommendation of that 5 servings of vegetables and fruit help us get to that 25 to 38 grams per day. Depends on what the food is. So, of course, we want to choose fresh or frozen vegetables or fruits more often. We want to try to avoid juices. So things like orange juice or apple juice, we don't get the fiber from them. Smoothies you do because you blend it up. But juicing where you take out the fiber, we want to try to avoid that. And a serving is 1 cup of leafy greens, so lettuce, and you can use your hand, that's about a cup, or half a cup if it's chopped, so something like broccoli or cucumber, or 1 piece of fruit, like a medium-sized piece of fruit about the size of your hand. So, an apple or a couple of clementines would be a serving. I saw some great comments in here about adding some other sources of fiber in. Yeah, prunes can be really helpful at softening our bowel movements. The thing with dried fruits, so as you can see, I focus on fresh fruits, is that often when we have dried fruits is they coat them in sugar. That's what helps make them sweet. Perfect example is cranberries. When you have cranberries fresh, they're really tart. When they're dried, they're often quite sweet. So also when we eat dried fruits, instead of having, maybe like 12 grapes, if they're raisins, we end up having like 50 to get us full. So the fresh tends to be a bit better than the dried things. So the examples are generally raw portions. So when we cook things, of course, the vegetables and fruits, they really soften and they go down. So using raw as your measuring piece is really great. But it's okay to cook them, right? We don't have to have raw vegetables and fruits per day. You can certainly cook them. It's a really personal preference there. All right. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about sugar. So this is another new area in the recommendations for PKD. And sugar is a type of carbohydrate that provides us with energy. And when our body breaks it down, it becomes glucose. And glucose is a source of fuel in our body. There are 2 types of sugar. There's naturally occurring sugar, and that comes from dairy products, milk, yogurt, cheese. And then there's added sugars. And these are things that are in baked goods, candy, juice, or pop, desserts. And with PKD, we really want to aim to reduce the amount of added sugars into our diet to about 5% of our total calories. That works out to be about 6 teaspoons of sugar per day. By reducing the added sugars in our diet, it's one of the best ways to support our kidney health. But also because too much sugar can increase our cholesterol, it can lead to weight gain, which can all accelerate kidney disease. So when we think about the types of sugar in our diet, things that are more naturally occurring, like in milk, fruit, and even whole grains, those are okay for us to keep in our diet. Things that are added sugars, like baked goods, candy, pop, juice, cakes, cookies, all of those things, those we want to try to limit. Honey or maple syrup in our tea or coffee, those are the ones that we want to try to limit. To determine how much added sugar is in a food, we can look at the label, and that can be a really great way to help us identify it. So the first thing we always want to look at is that serving size. And then under the carbohydrates, we can look at the sugar. Now, the label doesn't differentiate between natural or added sugars, but in the ingredient list, it will tell you. It will tell you which ones are natural, which ones were added. And you can compare the ingredient list and the nutrition facts table to determine which one might be the lowest in sugar. And to put it into perspective, this example here, which has 22 grams of sugar on the label, is about 5.5 teaspoons of sugar. Now, understanding if that's natural or added sugar is really important because we're aiming for about 6 teaspoons of added sugar or less per day. So for example, I said that some of those foods will have natural sugars in them, like milk or yogurt or kefir, for example. All of these dairy products are fine, but when we also see in the ingredient list that there is added sugar, maybe it's vanilla flavoring or blueberry flavoring, and that one has more sugar compared to the plain one, we may want to choose the plain one to reduce that added sugar. We can kind of see where that added sugar is coming from. If you had to swap one thing in your diet that has a bit of added sugar into it, what might that be? Now, for me, a really good example is instead of doing vanilla yogurt, which I quite like, I do plain and then I add a bit of vanilla extract to it because vanilla extract doesn't have any sugar in it. It just has that vanilla flavoring. But when we buy vanilla yogurt or kefir at the grocery store, that is going to have sugar in it. So for me, that's one kind of easy swap I do. Another example might be, what do you put in your coffee or tea, or what do you drink in the morning? Thinking about if there's any things that you're having in your diet that have these added sugars into them that you can reduce, or either the portion size or the frequency can be really helpful. There's not any reason to avoid artificial sweeteners with PKD. Not everyone likes them for personal reasons, though, but they're not harmful. The concern, though, with artificial sweeteners is that they often displace other nutrients in our body. And so when we have the sweetness, but we don't have the calories, our body ends up looking for more foods. So they can cause us to eat more. So it's better to try to just have the natural sugars, so things like fruits, milk, whole grains, rather than using the artificial sweeteners if possible. So I know there's been some questions about PKD and PLD in the comment section. I'll talk a little bit about it here in the fat section, because this is where it really comes into play. So fat is necessary in our diet, but not all fats are created equal. We need fat for energy, we need it for hormone balancing in our body, we need it for absorbing vitamins. And there are three main types of fats in our diet. So there's unsaturated fat, that includes monounsaturated fats, which are really healthy fats found in things like olive oil or canola oil, avocados, almonds, pecans, pistachios, cashews. And with this, there's really a lot of omega-3 and heart healthy fats in these unsaturated fats. Saturated fats, on the other hand, these are what we would call unhealthy fats. They're naturally found in foods like animal products, like meat, poultry, often when they have more marbling or fat on them, or skin. They can be found in higher fat dairy products. So yogurt that's more than 2%, milk that's more than 2%, cheese that's more than 20%. They're often found in coconut oil or palm oils or tropical oils. And we want to limit the amount of saturated fat that we have in our diet. So things like fried foods or processed snacks, baked goods, butter, ghee, fatty cuts of meat, deli meat, they tend to be quite high in saturated fat. And these are things that we want to limit. Trans fats, this is another unhealthy fat and another one that we want to be avoiding. It's mostly out of our diet here in Canada, but if we do find it, we're likely to find it in packaged foods, and typically ones that are like salty convenience snacks, which we likely are avoiding anyways with PKD from a sodium perspective. And so we do want to try to avoid as much trans fats as possible. Because fat is necessary in our diet for all of these important hormones, there is a target in the KDIGO guidelines. So aiming for about 30% of calories from fats, but we want to be choosing these unsaturated fats. They are things like olive oil, canola oil, avocado, nuts, fatty fish if we are consuming animal products. So things like salmon, trout, mackerel. all really great fish options. And these unsaturated fats help to reduce inflammation. They also help to reduce high cholesterol. And those things are important for us to also preserve our kidney function. We want to limit our saturated fat to 10% of calories. Um, and that should be 10% of our fat calories as well. So trying to limit things like fried foods, processed snacks, baked goods, high fat dairy, butter, fatty cuts of meat, deli meats, ghee. All of these things are things that we want to try to limit. And when we have PLD, in addition to PKD, modifying our fat sources is very important to help manage that liver. So some swaps that maybe we do to try to choose healthier fats is maybe we put a sprinkle of nuts instead of cheese on our salad. Maybe we use olive oil instead of butter when we're cooking. Uh, Things like using olive oil on a salad dressing and vinegar as opposed to using Caesar dressing or ranch dressing, which is going to have a bit more saturated fat in them. When we're cooking, we could use olive oil, avocado oil, canola oil. Those are all really great sources of unsaturated fats. There are many margarines that are made out of olive oil. That would be an alternative for butter if you are looking for something more spreadable. The plant-based options would also be something else to take a look at there too. But I would be kind of curious to look at the ingredient list as well, just to see how many preservatives or additives they're also putting in there. Some of the ways that we can lower our saturated fat intake is using that nutrition label, and kind of that 5% daily value or less for saturated fat is a really good target. We really want to have as little possible trans fats and choosing lower fat dairy products. So things like 2% yogurt or less, 2% milk or less, or choosing non-dairy beverages if you prefer. And for cheese, 20% or less. So there are lots of low sodium, low fat cheese like bocconcini, for example, goat's cheese, Jarlsberg. Those can be really nice options. Choosing lean sources of meat. So if you are consuming animal products, things like chicken or turkey, as opposed to red meat, like beef, pork, or lamb, are much lower in saturated fat. If you're consuming animal products, maybe you aim for fish 2 to 3 times per week, like salmon, trout, or mackerel. They are much higher in the omega-3s and the unsaturated fat compared to the other options like cod or shrimp, those sort of things. And cooking with less fat. So often when we are preparing our foods, we will put quite a lot of oil or butter in the pan. So trying to use less, or even baking, roasting, steaming, as opposed to deep frying, can help us to reduce how much fat we are using when we're cooking. So canola oil is not inflammatory. It's quite high in unsaturated fats, but you want to look for a pure canola oil. Sometimes canola oil is often mixed with other things, and so looking for just a pure one. Canola oil has a much higher smoke point compared to olive oil. So that's why it's recommended in cooking. Similarly, avocado oil has a higher smoke point than olive oil, so kind of a good option to use there. We want to try to avoid the ghee though and butter. Ghee is clarified butter, but it does have quite a lot of saturated fats in it still. Olive oil is no problem to use. Usually the recommendation for those liquid fats per day is 3 tablespoons. So your thumb is a really great measure of a tablespoon. We don't always have measuring cups near us, so that's kind of a nice way. So as we get to talk a little bit about how we can use nutrition on a day-to-day basis, I'd love to know, do you meal prep? Just check the chat here and see kind of some of the other questions, make sure I've answered them. Some of them I'll get to in the Q&A. Awesome. Some people meal prep. That's wonderful. Great. I'm so happy to hear that. No, that's okay. Good. All right, well, we have a bit of a variety here. So when we think about these recommendations for PKD, it starts with the fluids, then we look at the sodium. So depending on if you're on dialysis, if you've had a transplant, if you're newly diagnosed with PKD, your sodium amount may differ. Generally, it's 1,500 to 2,000 milligrams per day. Most Canadians consume about 3,600 milligrams. If you have low blood pressure, I would speak with your healthcare team to understand how they would like you to manage that. But in a general sense, many of us are following a low sodium diet. From a protein perspective, we really want to focus on building a pantry and building our meals that are more plant forward. We know that plant-based proteins are much easier for the kidneys to filter, and they can help with heart health. It can reduce the buildup of waste products. So choosing items and having them in our pantry that are a bit more plant forward can be really helpful. Those are things like nuts and seeds and tofu. Even quinoa is a great plant-based protein. Things like beans and legumes. Canned are really fine. They're great in the pantry. You can get the no added salt ones. They're very shelf stable, and they're quick and easy to prepare. So we don't necessarily need to be, sometimes when we use plant-based proteins, the meals are actually quicker to prepare as well. But you don't necessarily need to buy dried beans. With PKD and kind of soaking them, the canned no added salt ones are just as nutritious. When we build our pantry, we want to maximize those whole foods. So vegetables, fruits, whole grains. For the grains, choose the ones that are unprocessed or minimally processed. So those would be called whole grains. So whole grains means it has the germ, the bran, and the endosperm, all of the fiber, all of the vitamins. So very different than refined carbohydrates or white bread, white rice. We want things more like oatmeal or quinoa or whole grain pasta or couscous or barley or bulgur. So we can add these to things like soup. So we can use them as a side dish at dinner. We can make a warm bowl of quinoa or oatmeal in the morning for breakfast. There's a lot of variety that we can do with these whole grains. Whereas vegetables and fruits, these we might be keeping in our fridge or we might be keeping them in our freezer. And it doesn't matter if it's fresh or frozen, they're both just as nutritious. The difference is that frozen can often last longer. So it may also be a bit more economical depending on your needs. When we want to look also in our pantry, we want to look for things that are minimally processed or minimize those processed foods because they can have higher amounts of potassium or phosphorus additive. Instead, choose things like herbs or spices and for flavor boosters. So looking for, on a low sodium diet, it's not a no flavor diet. Using things like oregano and basil, thyme, rosemary, lemon, vinegars like red wine vinegar, balsamic vinegar, apple cider vinegar, all really nice ways to add flavor without the salt. Looking for some shelf-stable flavor boosters like no added salt seasoning blends, whether it be by like Dash or McCormick's. Coconut aminos are a great soy sauce substitute. No added salt tomato sauces. When you grocery shop, reading food labels can be really helpful. When you're planning meals, shopping our pantry first and really reimagining those leftovers before purchasing fresh foods. So, last night I had some rice in the fridge and I thought, what am I going to do with this tomorrow? So lo and behold, today is tomorrow. So tonight I'm going to be making a stir fry, tofu stir fry, because I think it is a great way of using up some of those odds and ends in our fridge. And that's one of our great recipes that's coming out in our Love Your Kidneys version 2 in the next couple of months. So thinking about what we have, right? So right now I have a bit of broccoli, I have a bit of peas and carrots and mushrooms in the fridge, and they've been there for a few days. So I want to get use of those before I go to the grocery store on the weekend. So finding what we have in our pantry and in our fridge first and kind of reimagining how we can use those before we buy fresh foods. And keeping food safety on our mind is really important. So whether we're shopping, whether we're cooking, or whether we're storing our foods. because we want to make sure that what we're eating and buying is really safe for us. So I know we recently published a blog post about food safety, so I would certainly take a look at that. If you are meal prepping, we want to make sure that you're not making too far in advance and that there's bacteria that grows on your food. So how we prepare our foods is just as important as what we are purchasing. When we're making PKD friendly meals, they can taste good and they can be nutritious, and nutrition is one of those great things that we get to control. So some strategies when we're cooking is, adding flavor with homemade sauces, seasonings, or dressings when we're doing that. Instead of cooking with butter, maybe you use olive oil. And replacing your heavy cream with maybe blended cauliflower or white beans or cashews in sauces. Baking your foods instead of frying them. Using avocado instead of mayo. Looking at lean sources of meat or plant-based proteins as opposed to things like beef or chicken, pork. So things like chicken instead of beef or deli meats. Maybe you use hummus with vegetables on a sandwich as opposed to deli meats. Can kind of be a nice way. One of the things I wanted to ask is, have you ever worked with a dietitian for your PKD? Not many individuals have, but I always like to see if you have, what was most helpful for you. I think over the years, we've really learned a lot about nutrition, and many individuals with PKD didn't get access to them. So the PKD Foundation has a lot of really great resources. So in the My PKD community, if you haven't checked it out, that's a great starting point. And then also with our Love Your Kidneys, which is just for PKD patients, has some really great resources too. So, a dietitian can help to slow your disease progression. It can help to manage symptoms and prevent complications. It can help to manage and optimize your nutrient intake, provide you with practical meal planning ideas and cooking support, and help to translate your labs into really individualized support. A dietitian can help make nutrition really less overwhelming, more enjoyable, and tailored to you so that you can live well with PKD. Uh, you know, we've seen a lot of different questions in here of, can I have this food or can I have that food? I'm going to go through and try to answer them if I haven't. But most importantly, I think we are each individuals, right? We've all had very different questions and very different experiences with PKD. So dietitians can make it a little bit less overwhelming for you and really create realistic meal plans. And that's what the Love Your Kidneys also works out to do. Because we want to understand that label reading can be helpful. Grocery shopping can be really helpful. We often think about the perimeter, shopping the vegetables and fruits first, and then looking at the beans and legumes next, because there are some really great things in the center aisles, all of those great no added salt products. But really knowing that flavor is possible, how we prepare, what we choose can really help with our PKD, and that no one size fits all. One of the things I think is always important is that nutrition can really support PKD, and it's something that you can control. We really want to focus on progress, not perfection. Um, if all you do this week is add one more vegetable to your plate, or you take one meal one day this week and you make it vegetarian, that's really great progress. Progress, not perfection. Focusing on fiber and healthy fats and less sugar, like in the recipes in Love Your Kidneys, can help you round out your diet. We all know we need to drink more. We all know we need to manage our salt. If we think about these other 3 strategies, we help to refine our diet a bit more. Practical steps can make a difference and really help with sustainability. So we don't want to go from 0 to 100, right? Thinking about, what's one small thing we can do. If we have animal protein at every single meal per day, can we try to just limit it to once per day? Can we use leftovers for our lunch instead of buying our lunch? Can we find a way of incorporating more plant-based proteins? That can really help with sustainability of this diet. And really, it's a lifestyle, not a diet. There's help available. You can connect with a dietitian who supports those with PKD. You can also connect with others through the My PKD community, which is, of course, through the PKD Foundation of Canada. Lots of great ideas, recipes, and encouragement shared in this community, and really credible information, which helps to support you in your knowledge. So certainly those are really great sources. And we do have the Love Your Kidneys, the first edition, available on the website, so you can certainly get access to that. But thank you for spending time with me today. We're going to open it up for questions, whether it's fiber, label reading, cooking ideas. I see there's some in the Q&A, but I'll just take a quick chat take a look in the chat to make sure I answered everything as well. Right. So talked a little bit about low potassium diet. The question here is, what is the definition of a low potassium diet? I've seen 2,000 milligrams up to 3,000 milligrams. So the definition of a low potassium diet is anywhere from 2,500 to 3,000 milligrams per day. Really, it's about the serving size. So half a cup of an item and less than 250 milligrams of potassium per item helps to manage the potassium. But the potassium additives is the first thing that we really want to look at. And then I think also making sure that you're pooping well, your blood sugars are under control, and taking a look at if any of your medications are potassium sparing is really important too. There is a really good website called the Canadian Nutrient File. It's run through Health Canada. It looks at the amount of potassium as well as many other nutrients. I would say that that's probably the most reliable information about potassium in foods. It's quite a comprehensive database as well. Another one that I would say would be Chronometer, because it is validated against databases in Canada, the US, and the UK and Australia. Other things like when you just Dr. Google how much potassium is in it, or you use things like MyFitnessPal, for example, they're not always validated sources. So I would stick with Canadian Nutrient File for sure. Chronometer is actually a really cool thing because you can estimate the amount of potassium in your recipes. So you can enter in how much potassium is in, you can enter in all of the ingredients for a recipe and it will tell you how much it is there. Because potassium is now a mandatory labeling requirement here in Canada, so you'll see it on the nutrition facts table. You can see if you purchase any packaged items like baked goods, the potassium will be there. If a restaurant has more than 20 establishments in Ontario, can't speak for the other provinces, but they will have the nutrition information online as well, and potassium should be there. But understanding which foods are higher in potassium by using that Canadian Nutrient File can really help us to determine or kind of estimate how much potassium is in a food. So for example, if you're going out to eat and the salad has spinach in it, maybe you ask them to swap it for arugula because it's lower in sodium or lower in potassium, excuse me. Another question here about high fiber items like oats and grains have higher potassium levels. So while they have higher potassium levels, they're not absorbed the same. So for example, rice has about 150 milligrams of potassium in half a cup, whereas white rice has like 50. When you think about your entire day, 100 milligrams of potassium is nothing. The fiber from the whole grains is going to provide you with much more benefit because you'll be pooping better, and then you can get rid of the potassium in your body better. So potassium actually gets excreted in our poop. It's really important that we are having good bowel movements when we have high potassium. That's one of the ways of treating it. So I don't think it's necessary for us to be avoiding whole grains when we have high potassium. It's just about the portion size and the frequency of them. Another question here, what can you eat during travel by plane? That's a really great question. And I think that was also a question that was submitted ahead of time. So thank you for reminding me that there are a couple there too. So when we have kidney conditions, you can certainly travel, speaking with your healthcare team to see if there's any modifications that need to be made with your medications, if you're changing time zones, really important, or any vaccinations that might be needed. What I love is that when you are traveling by plane, you can contact the airline 24 hours before your flight. And they have a few different menu options, and they'll read you and can provide you with them. So, for example, I just flew with Air Canada. They have all of their menu items online. I was able to go through them, take a look at what food items may be more applicable for me or not, and then create a custom menu. Similarly, when you're traveling for extended periods of time, or you are traveling at all, you can look at menus ahead of time. You can look at restaurants ahead of time. That helps you to plan. But they're like, certainly traveling with PKD is fine. Speaking with your healthcare team at when it is safe for you and when it is not would be important. I'm not a doctor, and I think it really depends on someone's health condition, but depending on where you're going, I've had many individuals with PKD travel all over the world. So it takes a little bit of planning, just like if we're going out for dinner here. We want to look at the menus ahead of time and maybe call the restaurant, ask some questions. But you can easily, find a location that you're traveling to that has a kitchen. And maybe you're able to prepare your breakfast and lunch every day. So you know that it's going to be higher in fiber, lower in sodium, plant-based. And then your dinner meal might be a little bit higher in sodium than what you might typically eat, but you can still stay within your target. No problem.
Well,
Now,
thanks so much, Emily. I notice we are at our time, and unfortunately, we'll have to end here because we have another session coming up at 1. There are questions. If there are questions still in the chat, or we have answered all the Q&A, but if there's questions still in the chat, I can send the chat to Emily, and she can provide any other answers that we haven't yet heard. I just really appreciate you being here today, Emily. I know that we often get questions about PKD nutrition and how people can fit that into their everyday lives. So thank you so much for being here and answering these questions for us. I know that this will be a valuable resource. And just a reminder to everyone that we are hoping that our new cookbook, The Love Your Kidneys 2, will be out either in December or early 2026. And we will send the link for that to all the registrants of this particular session. And this will be available, the video of this will be available on our YouTube channel in the coming weeks. So thank you so much, Emily.
thanks, everyone. Have a great day.